Okay, so we didn't have share last week, so it's been a while. Let's go. We're on Daf Chafchet Amud Aleph. I don't think we quite got to the Mishnah, so let's go back a little bit. We're talking about weighing meat and uvdin dechol and the problem with that, right? So we saw there was a case as follows. Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 8 or 9 lines down from the top of the page. Right near the beginning of the line it says Rabbi Chia v'Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe. Rabbi Chia v'Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe shoklim mana keneged mana b'yom tov. Right, we spoke about how you aren't allowed to use a scale in different ways. It's often the chol. Maybe if you do it with a shinoi, you know use the weights with a different sort of balance. But it says that Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe would shoklin mana keneged mana. Right, they would take the one piece of meat and another piece of meat and weigh them against each other to be able to know the size and the weight of the meat, to know which is bigger, and to know they're the same size, etc. When we are splitting up the meat. So it says that with shoklim anakin manam biyom tov. So the question is, Kaman, which opinion does this follow? Right? We saw different opinions earlier on in the Gemara. Lo Rabbi Yehuda v'lo Rabbanan. The two opinions we saw, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanan, this does not seem to be compatible with either of them. Ik Rabbi Yehuda amal shoker adam b'sar k'neged hakli o k'neged hakopitz. But Rabbi Yehuda was the one who said, if you don't use the weights, but you use the knife or something like that instead, so then you can weigh it. That's a sufficient shinoi. But that's what he said. He said specifically, right, in the Mishnah we saw, Rabbi Yehuda said, "Keneged hakli o keneged hakopitz, keneged hakli in, keneged midi achrin elo." So if you're doing it against the things using the things he said, why don't he list those implements specifically? Because that's considered a shinoi, but something else is not. So, right, keneged hakli in, keneged midi achrin elo. Ik Rabbanan. So where does meat against one another come in? If it was like Rabbanan, then it's going to be even worse. Because what are Rabbanan say? They said you can't use the scale at all. So therefore it can't be Rabbanan either. So the answer is Inu Davud ke Rabbi Yoshua. Of course, there is a third opinion. It says these Chachamim were splitting up the meat in that way. They were following the opinion of Rabbi Yoshua. Now, what does Rabbi Yoshua say? Titania. Rabbi Yoshua mer shoklin mana keneged mana b'yom tov. Okay. So it's the third opinion. And we see that Rabbi Yoshua says you can weigh the meat up against one another. Now, Amar Rav Yosef, halachak Rabbi Yeshua, who il udnan b'bucholot kvatei. Rav Yosef comes along and says, so we've seen three opinions, right? Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbanan, and now Rabbi Yeshua. So who do we pass? Like Rav Yosef says that halacha follows Rabbi Yeshua. Ho'il v'tnan b'bucholot kvatei, because we have a stam mishnah in Masechet Bechorot, which follows him. Now, this is where it gets a little bit complicated because the Mishnah in Bechorot does not explicitly address our case at all. So we're going to see exactly what the limit is and how you extrapolate one from the other. But he says as follows. Right, Amar Rav Yosef alachak Rabbi Yoshua. Ho'il v'nam b'chol kvatei. Ditnan. What does the Mishnah Bechorot say? It says as follows. Psolei hamukdashin hanatan le'ekdesh v'shoklin mana keneged mana b'bechor. Okay, so it's a little bit complicated. We only have a small portion of the Mishnah that's quoted over here in the Gemara. What we saw last time, we saw Rashi goes on a long explanation. Essentially, what we're saying is like this: we have different types of korbanot, which are what happens. Excuse me. What happens when a korban becomes we have what's called psulei muktashin, meaning something which was originally designated to be a korban, but it now has a mum and has a psul of whatever type, and it cannot be brought. It cannot no longer be brought as a korban. So then it goes out to chulin. It goes out to chulin. In other words, we redeem it. We transfer the kedusha from that animal onto a certain amount of money. And the question is, what remains the status of the animal? So there, the Mishnah discusses that certain psulei muktashin, it depends. That if we have a certain, with the other korbanot, it says that there still is a certain level of, it talks about a certain level of sanctity that you can't do something which is a maseh bizayon according to that animal. So over here, we're dealing with. So there's distinction made between Bechor and Maaseh without getting into the technicalities now. But the point is, says Psulei Mukdashin Natan Le'Ekdesh v'shoklin mana keneged mana b'Bechor. In other words, the Mishnah over there tells me that specifically regarding a Bechor, that we still have to keep a certain level of Kedusha, even though that's now not going to be even though that's now not going to be given over to Hekdesh, it goes out to Chulin, but nonetheless, you still can't do a Maaseh Bizayon with it. But the Mishnah tells me that what you are allowed to do is this Shoklin Mana Keneged Mana B'Bechor. Right? That's exactly our case. That's what we're talking about here. We're saying, can you take this meat and can you weigh it up, different pieces of meat against each other? The Mishnah there says you can do that with a Bechor, even though you're not meant to do an act which is a Maaseh Chol, which is a Bizayon. Just one moment. Okay, so in other words, we wanted to say, in our case, we're dealing with Yom Tov. The question is, when you are weighing up this meat, mana keneged mana, is that considered a maaseh chol or not? So we saw it's not compatible with Rabbi Yehuda, it's not compatible with Chachamim. However, it is compatible with Rabbi Yoshua. He says that explicitly. He says that explicitly regarding Yom Tov. Now, regarding Bechorot, we don't find. The question would be, Shoklim mana keneged mana, if we consider that a use of chol or a mundane use, so to speak. So then that would be, we would think you can't do it with a bechor, you can't do it on Yom Tov either. If you can do it with a bechor, you can do it on Yom Tov. So even though there the Mishnah does not mention Rabbi Yoshua, but it says that you're allowed shoklin mana keneged mana, we can assume, we can extrapolate, and that's what Rav Yosef does, that this is the opinion of Rabbi Yoshua, and then it's a stam Mishnah that's like him, and therefore that's the way we paskin halacha. Now, says the Gemara here on the next line, says Amale Abaye. Says maybe not. Maybe the comparison between the Mishnah over there and our case over here is not so clear, and you can question it in two directions. Amala Abaye, v'dir maloi. Ad kan lo kamar Rabbi Yoshua acha, ela deleka bizayon kodshim. Aval hatam deika bizayon kodshim lo. So you could say, hang on a second. I mean, Abaye is challenging Rav Yosef's proof that this Mishnah, this Stam Mishnah, as far as like Rabbi Yoshua. So the first challenge is he says, no, maybe the Mishnah, maybe Rabbi Yoshua, I know what he holds by Yom Tov, but maybe that Mishnah there is not, maybe over there he would be more machmir than that Mishnah. That's got nothing to do with him. He says, right? Meaning Rabbi Yoshua says, you can do this over here because there's no bizayon kodshim. Yeah, on Yom Tov, right? It's not a, he's saying it's not a problem of uvdin the chol. But I'm not worried that you're going to come and do a bizayon kodshim, and therefore it's okay. But there, there where it is a bizayon to kodshim, so you would not allow it. So you could say that Rabbi Yeshua, that Mishnah over there, Rabbi Yeshua disagrees. Inami, alternatively, you could say the other way around. You could say, Ad kan lo kamir Rabbanan hatam, ela mishum de lo michzik uvdin dechol. In other words, you could say Rabbanan over there, it's not just the Stam Mishnah and Bechor, it's not just Rabbi Yeshua, it's everybody. You could say even Rabbanan agree. Rabbanan say, what's the problem? There's no problem weighing up the meat when it comes to Bechor because you're weighing it wide to distribute it, to share it between people. And that doesn't look like Uvdin the whole, right? But over here, when you're doing it sorry, meaning over there, right? Here you just here the way when you're splitting up the meat and dividing it, so it does look that's the ordinary way that you would do it on a weekday, and then there would be a problem. So in other words, the Mishnah over there, it's not so clear that the two cases are really parallel. And therefore, Abai is challenging. He's saying we don't know the Mishnah over there really is the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua. So that remains inconclusive. Either way, what's clear from the Gemara, we see that there are regarding Yom Tov that there are three opinions, right? There's Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yeshua. The question, the machloket between Rabbi and Rav Yosef, is whether the Mishnah in Bechorot that follows the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua, that's something else entirely. And you could say that Rabbi Yeshua would disagree there, or Chachamim would disagree here. That's the same thing. Okay, now it says the Gemara something else. It says, Lemeimra de kapte ahadadi. Remember, this whole story started how we had the two Chachamim, was Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe, that they were weighing up the meat one against another. Why were they weighing it up? To be exact, meaning the mashmot is, the implication is that they were makpid. They each wanted to get their exact right piece of meat and not to give too much to the other person. So it says the Gemara now, hang on a second. Were they really so makpid with one another? V'ahanu shavbenita da'atu levei Rebbe, v'ishtakach chamesh minahu b'Rabbi Chia v'lo kapid. But there was a case where we had shev benita. You had Rashi says over here, shev is sheva. There were 7 fish, 7 pieces of fish. This case that happened. Rashi says shiv'at agim sheba'u leRebbe v'nimtza shnatar Rabbi Chia chamesh v'olichan lebeito. Then Rebbe had 7 fish that came to him, and Rabbi Chia came, and he took 5 of them to his house. V'lo kapid Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe. We said Rabbi Shimon is the son of Rebbe. Was not makpid on this. Says Rashi, Lomar mishal avihu nizon yoter mimeni. Right? He's going to come and say, no. Why are you taking 5? You're taking too much. You should give him back. So therefore, if that's the case, we see that we're not so makpid with one another. So why are they so makpid with the meat? So Amarav Papa Shade Gavra Beinayu. If Papa says no, what's the difference over here? Meaning there's a mistake in the story. Actually, there was somebody else. Right? Shade Gavra Beinayu. You have to change the names. It wasn't actually Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe. He says Shade Gavra Beinayu. Rabbi Chia Rabbi Shimon bar Yossi. Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe or bar Kapara. So either was actually Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe Yossi, or it was Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe and bar Kapara. Apparently they were makpid with one another. Okay. Right. So now we move on to the next Mishnah. So now we open up a very, very, very complicated topic, which is the Mishnah over here, and for the next little bit, we're going to discuss the question of machshirei ochel nefesh. We've discussed ochel nefesh at length throughout the Masechet. We know ein ben yom tov l'shabbat ela ochel nefesh bilvad, meaning those malachot we've explained it many times. What are some of the parameters, as in which malachot of ochel nefesh are allowed on yom tov and which are not? But the question is, what about machshirei ochel nefesh? In other words, this is an action, this is a malacha which is not directly involved in the preparation of the food, but is involved in the preparation of the preparation. Right? We have Masechet Shabbat, we have a whole sugya about machshirei milah. But now we're talking about machshirei ochel nefesh. So for example, shchita is one of the malachot of ochel nefesh, right? So you can do shchita, at least in theory, on Yom Tov. What about sharpening the knife for the shchita? So that's not the shchita itself, but that is the preparation of the preparation, right? That would be that is machshir the ochel nefesh. So that is the sugya. It's going to be very, very complicated because we're going to see that one of the principles that emerges from the Gemara is going to be, we'll see a little bit later, is halacha ve'ein morinke. That there is a certain halacha, but it's not something that we teach in public. So how do we teach if it's something that we don't teach? Okay, that's going to be an interesting discussion. But it says the Gemara, so now we're talking about machshirei ochel nefesh. It says the Mishnah, and the way that it always is, the Mishnah does not list principles for us, but lists examples, and we learn through case study. So we say, ein mashchizin et hasakin b'yom tov, aval masya al gabei chaverta. So says the Mishnah, you cannot sharpen a knife on Yom Tov. However, what can you do? Well, masya al gabei chaverta. You place it on top of another knife. In other words, you can rub it against another knife. So the question is, when you rub the knife, the Gemara is going to discuss what exactly are you doing. Is that in order to sharpen it? This would be similar to the previous Mishnah that we saw, that you can't do something because it's uvd in the chol, or in this case because of machshirei ochel nefesh. But if you have a shinoi and you change it enough from the normally you have whatever you use for sharpening the knife. Yeah, you're rubbing it against another knife, so that's going to sharpen it. That's going to be a shinoi, and that's going to be allowed. Maybe that's one way of reading the Mishnah. Or Say, no, you use it in order to clean it, just to rub it off. Remember, in those days, they didn't have a scotchim, etc., and all the things that we have nowadays. A lot of the halachot of Yoredeya, you're talking about kashering knives, etc. You're talking about the sugya that talks about placing knives into the ground, right? Everybody knows that it's not actually accurate, but everybody knows that if you have a knife that you want to kasher, you just stick it into the ground or you stick it into the pot plants, right? So that halacha, no, etzva karka, is probably not really relevant nowadays. At least in most cases, you take a scotch and you clean it off with soap. That achieves probably much more than sticking it in the ground, but that's what they did in those days. Okay. So you're going to rub the knife onto another one in order to clean it. So it's not clear. We'll see different Gisod in the Gemara exactly what the Mishnah is saying over here, why it says it. But the point is, Mishnah says you cannot sharpen the knife, at least not in the normal way in Yom Tov, but you can rub it against another knife. So says the Gemara Maravona, Lo shano ela b'mashchezet shel even, aval b'mashchezet shel etz mutar. So says Ravona, what we are talking about, what we said in the Mishnah, that's when we're dealing with a sharpener that's made of stone. The implication is that is a much more proper way of doing it. Rashi says, "Mashchezet shel even the metakenet le shapir." It really brings around good benefit. The michzik metaken b'chol. Right, so it looks like you are sharpening it. You're fixing it the way you would normally do it on a weekday. So that's what we're talking about. But if it's of wood, so then it is allowed. Now the big question is, Ravona said lo shana. They didn't teach it about mashchezet shel etz. They taught it about a mashchezet shel even, but about a mashchezet shel etz. Okay. What didn't they teach? What is Ravona talking about? Those two words, lo shana. We're going to see a number of different gisot in the Gemara to try and explain exactly what it means. So Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Ha de'amart shel even asur. Okay, in other words, because what have you just said? I mean, you've just said that with the mashchezah of stone, it's going to be forbidden, but with wood, it's permitted. So what are we talking about that is permitted and forbidden? What is it? So opinion number one. Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Ha de'amart shel even asur. לא אמרן אלא לחדדה, אבל להעביר שמנוניתה מותר. Okay, as we said, when the Mishnah says, and this is where the confusion comes in, when the Mishnah says, Masiyah gabei chaverta, you can rub one knife against the other, do we mean rub it in order to sharpen it, or do we mean in order to clean it? And then we said, it depends whether we're using eitz or even. So the first bit Rav Yehuda said, Amashmuel, says, Hadi amach even. So that which you said, that with even, with stone, it's forbidden. Lo amran el lechadada. That means you can't sharpen it with a mashchezet shel even. Okay? Aval avir shamnunita. But if it's to clean it, mutar. But to clean it, you can use even shel even. And therefore, Michlal, therefore the inference is as follows. The b'shel etz, afilu lechadada, nami mutar. That if it's with wood, that even to sharpen it would be allowed. Okay? That is opinion number one. Opinion number one is, if I want to sharpen the knife, I'm allowed to do that with wood, but not with stone. And if I want to clean the knife, then I can use it with wood or with stone.
In practical terms, how could you possibly sharpen a knife with wood? Because if you put the knife in there, it would dull the knife, I would think.
Right.
I'm just thinking out loud. Unless it's a wooden knife. I mean, I'm just can't quite see the case, but whatever. Okay.
Okay, it's good. I don't know exactly what these kind of how these implements look. Maybe if you have a look in the Koran Gemara, they may have a picture which explains the whole thing.
Well, from my time working at a Beit Shchita, I saw the shochet over and over with stone, sharpening his knife. That I know from, but just the other I don't know. The old days.
I presume it would be a similar sort of mechanism, but the point is, but even the point is that's not the normal way of doing it. It doesn't work as well, and that's why we're going to have why there's going to be a leniency here. That's what it seems. Okay, so that was the first version. So now says the Gemara. Okay, so now we have a second version. It says Ika damatni la seifa. Okay, so now we have a second version. It says Ika damatni la seifa. Okay, so now we have a second version. Okay, so now we have a second version. 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 So now we have a second version see how it is, right? Ikadamani la sefer b'shel eitz mutar. In other words, we had our Mishnah, right? And then we had our statement of Rav Huna. So now he says, Ikadamani la said that say this is referring to the end of the statement, which is b'shel eitz mutar. And then it goes like this. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, had amalt b'shel eitz mutar, lo amran ela la'avir shamninuta. Aval lechadada asu. In other words, that which I'm saying that don't focus on the fact that I said that which Evan is asur. Focus on the fact that I said with eitz is mutar. And what is mutar with eitz? So that is only la'avir shamnunita. That is only to clean it. But in order to sharpen it, that would still be forbidden. So therefore, we would say, Miklal de b'shel even afilu la'avir shamnunita asur. According to this girsa, that would mean that with the mashchezet shel even you cannot use at all. The only thing you can do, right, whether it's to clean or whether it's to sharpen, whether it's even, it's going to be asur. With eitz, it's only going to be mutar in order to clean it. So according to the first, so it comes up as completely opposite understanding. According to the first version, we said that it's only with a mashchezet shel even that I'm not allowed to sharpen, but a mashchezet shel eitz I can use to sharpen, and I can use either of them to clean. According to the second version, it's completely opposite. It's only a mashchezet shel eitz that I can use and only to clean, but a mashchezet shel even I can't use at all, and I can't sharpen at all either. So those are the two opposite ways of understanding this. Okay. So all of that was going on, the statement of Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel was going here on the clarification of Rav Huna of the Mishnah. We said the Gemara started, said, Amar Rav Huna lo shanu ela mashchezet shel even, aval mashchezet shel eitz mutar. Right? And then Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel spoke on that. So either Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel said what he said regarding the first part of Rav Huna's statement, or he said regarding the second part of Rav Huna's statement. But now says the Gemara, we have a third way of understanding this. We see a fourth way as well. So ika de matnila amatnitin. There are those who say that no, Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel was not speaking about Rav Huna, but he was directly addressing the Mishnah. When the Mishnah said, Ein mashchezin et hasakin b'yom tov, and then we say, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, lo shanu ela lechadada, aval le'avir shamnunita mutar. In other words, now we're saying that he's clarifying what the statement of sharp, meaning using the sharpener bichlal, as opposed to rubbing one knife against the other. So what comes out of this is, it says miklal, al gabei chaverta, afilu lechadada nami mutar. So this could be right. So this comes out. It says if you are rubbing one knife against the other, so you could do that even to sharpen it. That would be fine. And then finally, a fourth way of reading it, so there are those who say that Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel's statement is going on the Sefer of the Mishnah, which was aval masyar gabei chaverta, right? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel lo shanu ela la'avir shamnunita, aval lechadada asur. Michlal de v'mashchedet afilu la'avir shamnunita asur. Right? In other words, if you read it like that, then you would say that when it says Masyar gabei chaverta, you can rub one against the other. So then Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel lo shanu ela la'avir shamnunita. You can rub one against the other. That is only to clean it, but to sharpen it, you can't do even that. And therefore, that's going to be the most machmer. So therefore, it means that means if you're using the mashchezet, not only can you not, whatever it's made of, not only can you not sharpen it, but you can't use it to go in to clean it, to wipe it off either. Okay, so those are four different ways of understanding the statement of Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, and four different ways, therefore, of what the halacha comes out of in terms of whether we distinguish between a mashchezet, according to the first two, It's about whether we distinguish between a mashchezet shel etz or mashchezet shel even. According to the last two, we're going back directly on the Mishnah, and it might be more lenient or might be more machmir, meaning if we're not there distinguishing between mashchezet shel etz or shel even, we're distinguishing between the two modes, which is a mashchezet bichlal versus just rubbing one knife against the other. Okay, now we're going to get into a little bit more of the discussion about machshir ochel nefesh and machshirei ochel nefesh. It's related to the sugya that comes later on. But I think we'll stop there for today. We'll pick that up tomorrow. Okay, so tomorrow 8:45 is regular.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Take care, gentlemen.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
Rabbi, do you know how